Welcome back to the 25 Days of Christmas Good Looking. I just want to sprinkle in a little twinkle of holiday cheer and swatch for you all of my single sparkly shadows. And then the second half will be my sparkly shadows from palettes. So if you're interested in that content, please make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned. Let's get into it. I want to start with the shadow that kind of started it all for us and what we think of when we think of wet and sparkly. And that is the Urban Decay Moon Dust Shadow in Space Cowboy. So I do have swatches of this on my channel in shorts and everything else, but here it is in all its glory. Okay, and then next to it, I want to swatch what I would consider an alternative for deeper skin tones. It is by a brand, a Chinese brand of makeup, and the parent brand seems to be Pudiaer when I dug in. And this is also called Space Cowboy, but it has a little bit darker, deeper base. Still has that rich sparkle. It's not going to show up as reflective as Space Cowboy from Urban Decay because there's not as much of a difference from the glitter to the base. The base isn't as light like it is in Urban Decay, but nonetheless, it is here for you to see. And those are two of the sparkly shades that I think of when, you know, those are what come to mind first. So let's go ahead and move on to the next brand. Next up, I'm going to feature a couple of Jaclyn Cosmetics toppers. These were limited edition, and they were, they can be found at TJ Maxx if you're looking, but I don't think these shades were one of them that made it. I have the shade North Star and Icicle. I think this is probably the closest to Urban Decay's Space Cowboy. It's a little bit of a, I don't know, it's not quite as sheer. And then here is North Star. The North Star is definitely like the Pudiaer version of Space Cowboy. Okay, here we go. So there is Icicle, and there's North Star. North Star would make a nice one and done sparkly shade, whereas I feel like Icicle probably should go ahead and be used on top. Do we want to see it against the Moon Dust Space Cowboy? Yes, we do. Let's just do it. This looks a little wetter. It's a little more glitterier. These are softer, more sheen. I think if I like had to say, I would say these are more like elegant, you know, going out. This is a little bit more party going, glittery-ness. But hopefully you can see. While I still have swatches out and on the back of my hand, we can go ahead and do Ritz. And then I also have the shade Fine Pearl, which I think this one has a little bit of a base to it, but it's still really pretty nonetheless. Ooh, this one's starting to kind of dry out. Okay, so there's Ritz, and then those are the two Jaclyn Hill eyeshadow toppers, and this is the Moon Dust Space Cowboy. I still think this is like the #1 most iconic one, but Ritz is very close second. I'm going to crease, I'm going to swatch into my creases here, but I'm going to go ahead and put Fine Pearl next to Ritz. Yeah, this one isn't quite as sheer as I'd hoped, but it's still quite sparkly. You can kind of see those glittery flecks there. Moving on to my Sephora brand eyeshadows that are sparkly, I have, these are the colorful metal effects. I have Demanding and Fantasia. We'll go ahead and swatch them on the other side, so then that way I can kind of have this as a comparison. So here is Demanding. You can really see, it's like a foiled, but it is quite, you know, it does have a bit of a golden base, so if you're not really truly into that, you may not be into this shadow, but you can kind of see it does have that little bit of a translucent base. Definitely gives a wet, glossy, glittery effect. Very pretty. Then here is, I think this is Demanding, and that's Fantasia. You can see right there, this has got a lot of glitter. It does have a little bit of a pink reflect. Trying to get you guys. There's something black, probably some sort of like eyeliner, but there you go. Here you can see that sparkle in those crevices. All right, I think we have enough room for these two. These are my Natasha Denona Chroma Crystal Top Coats, and I have the shade Nude, and then I have the duochrome in, I think it's Terracotta Green? Burnt Terracotta Green, and it has that vermilion base with the green shift, but it does have a quite transparent. So if you're not interested in really, really high opacity duochromes, this might be an option. So we're going to go ahead and swatch it. I am not a fan of the Natasha Denona ones, by the way. They're not as, these are quite similar to the Jaclyn Hill ones. I think you can probably see. Kind of looks like Icicle. No, actually might look like North Star. Yeah, this one here looks quite similar to Nude. There is some glitteriness going on. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's really not to the degree or depth of even these Sephora shades right here. All right, next. This isn't really like a translucent, glittery, wet looking shade as much as it is just, well, kind of is. I really wanted to stay away from any of those clear bases, but with the like iridescent multi-chromes, the greens, the teals, the pinks, the fuchsia shifting shades, just because there's so many of those and it would make this video, and it really just needs to be in its own video actually, but there you go. And that's the duochrome. These are very pretty. These Ulta Bouncy shadows have been getting a lot of praise recently, and for good reason. They are nice, wet, glittery, beautiful, wet looking shadows. I have the shade here, Buttercream, Macaroon, and Italian Ice. Okay, and I'm going to swatch them in the shade, in the same same order that I showed them to you. So this is, I don't even remember, Buttercream, Macaroon, and Italian Ice. And you can see that this one is the most glittery of them all because it has such a translucent base, or a light colored base. So these other two are really, they're quite a bit more shimmery in person than you can see on camera, I feel. But there you go. Lastly, I did want to include Rowan's Disco Eye in summer, just because I feel like it kind of trends towards that, but it does have one of the more deeper of the bases, but it does fall into that glittery, sparkly. And it's probably the biggest, glitteriest particles of all the shadows that I have. It's the most similar to the Rowan 1111 quad. So if you have that one, this is very similar to that. So it'd be kind of like adding to your collection, but just really glittery and pretty. And because of the shade being kind of light, it does give off a nice, like, glittery wetness. Let's jump over to some eyeshadow palettes that have glittery topper shades. All right, I'm gonna keep these up for reference. So again, this is Urban Decay's Space Cowboy. These are the two Jaclyn Hills in Icicle and North Star. This is Ritz, and this one I could probably just erase, but that was Fine Pearl. That one looks more like a shimmer than anything. I thought it looked glittery and kind of sheer, but... So there's those four, and I think those are probably some of the most popular, or at least Urban Decay and Ritz are very popular. And then this next one is from the Pat McGrath Midnight Sun palette, and it is the shade in, what is it, Astral Solstice? And this is one of the glitteriest, wettest looking shadows that you can find that is in an actual pressed pigment or baked formula, I should say. So I'm going to go ahead and swatch it right now. And you can just see the level of intensity in this shade. It is like nothing else. I wish she would make this in a single. She could literally charge, you know, 30 bucks for it, and still people would pay for it. This one has a dent in it, by the way. So that is Astral Solstice. And if it's not, I'll go ahead and put the actual name of it. So next up, in my MAC Feast Your Eyes palette, whoopsie daisy, I have this sparkler here and this sparkler here. And what's really funny is the names on the back don't actually coincide. They moved the palettes or the shadows around inside. So like, for example, Velvet or What a Pair is right next to Feast Your Eyes. But What a Pair is here. So where would number one be? This one? I don't think that's Feast Your Eyes. So anyways, like I was saying, it's not that important. I don't know what the shade names are entirely, but they do have some really, really beautiful sparkles. And I think these are, again, a baked formula. Nothing compared to the Pat McGrath, but of course you've got some nice sparkly shadows that contend with like your Urban Decay and your Ritz shadows. So if you like glittery sparkles and you have this palette, you've got two shades. It is discontinued. I just kind of wanted to swatch it for you. Okay, let's move on. Here's one that I think you'll be very, very pleased with. Oh, if it goes like this. Okay. There's a couple of different sparklers in this. And I think Stardust is one of them. Oh, you can't even see it. Stardust is one of them. And then I know White Diamond is another one. Should I go ahead and just erase these because those are singles, and we'll leave the two MAC sparkler shades on there, and as well as the Pat McGrath? I think so. I think that's how I want to do that, just to have something else to, you know, show. But anyways, here's White Diamond. I probably even have a magnet here somewhere. This does have a bit of a white iridescent base to it. So, I mean, it's not like 100% clear, but it is a very beautiful shade in the Noir palette. And you can see there is a little bit of a transparency there, but it does kind of have that blue icy shift. Just also for reference, I did swatch Majestic, which looks to be a sparkler shade. And it's like, I would call this celestial, just because it does have a base, but it has a very sparkly topper type of shade to it. So like if you're mixing some of these dark shimmers on your lid, you could easily roll this puppy over the top and just take that look to the next level. And shearing it out, you can see that there's a lot of sparkle and not very much base left. So, and then also I think this shade right here, Stardust, might also be one. It feels like one. Yeah, it does have a bit of a base, but it is one of those more, oh my gosh, Do you know which one this reminds me of? This reminds me of that second shade in the Makeup by Mario palette. Does it not? It has a little bit of blue, but it's mostly neutral. Does it not remind you of the Makeup by Mario shadow? And then just to kind of show you guys a comparison, here is Silver Moon and this is Rendezvous, and you can see here this has like a base to it and this is like a sparkle. So you can see it. This does have a little bit of a base, but then when you kind of shear it out, you get all that glittery sparkliness, whereas this is just a shimmer. So there's quite a few sparkler shades in here. There's these two I would call Celestial, as well as this is trending on a wet looking shadow that's, you know, like got that clear base, and then you've got this one as a sparkly topper shadow. So a lot, this is kind of like a diamond in the rough here with the Lorac Pro Noir palette. The Lorac Pro, the Soleil, the only shadows that I can recall having somewhat of a clear transparent base is the shade Opal. I do have this in a single. It kind of, it's a little more like trending on, let me take it out. Actually, I have it. It's whatever, we'll take it out. So it is a sparkler shade. You can see that. But it really does have quite a bit of opacity when you're really like, you know, looking at it, as far as you can get a really good swatch. But see, you can also see through it. It just has a really high reflectivity. I wonder if it would be similar. I think I've swatched it next to the shade in Pat McGrath's palette, and unfortunately it just doesn't have enough glitteriness to be an alternative for that. But that is a good shade to use as a topper. And none of these other ones, I don't think, actually this one right here, this is Desert Rose, and it is a topper shade too. Oh, you missed the swatch. Get with it. Focus. This again, you have to shear it out in order to see that it is like that topper shade, because it does have enough pigment in it. But you can see that it does have that wetness to it. Next up, in the Nabla Side by Side Nude palette, there's two Celestial shades in the palette, and they are Body and Soul and Better Society. And that is kind of their topper formula. So these two are Celestial, and then they used to sell singles, and they had like 3 or 4 Celestial shades in that. Again, they don't sell the singles anymore, I don't think. So here's Body and Soul, and then Better Society is kind of that. Yes, they are like the wet topper shades, but this is more for deeper skin tones, whereas this is probably for like a lighter skin tone. But let's go ahead and get a swatch. I don't know if you can see that, but there you have it. There, I kind of turned down the intensity of the lights a little bit so we can get maybe a little bit more of a, I guess, inconsistent lighting, but uneven lighting is what really shows the shifts and the sparkle and the glimmer. So we're going to try that. So, you know, mess with the lighting there a little bit. Okay, this is probably the other very famous formula that's known for the wet sparkly shades, and those are Sparks and Kava in the Natasha Denona Gold palette. So here is Sparks. Oops. And then here is Kava. And this has a more gold undertone to it. And you can just see those glittery flecks there. And then it's got kind of that transparent, translucent base. It's really quite nice. There we go. Now we're getting a nice little gleam. Next up, I do have what seems to be a nice celestial shade at the very least in the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. Actually, both Gold Glitch and Supermoon look kind of similar to the Natasha Denona Gold, so I'm going to see how similar they are. I know this is more icy blue, and then this does seem to be a more rose gold than the actual true gold, but it does look like, you know, yeah, it does look a little more rose gold, but still, nonetheless, it is that nice like topper shade. And then there's the two from Nabla. I'll go ahead and take those off now. And I'm trying to get as much of the glitter off as possible. We'll go ahead and do Supermoon. This one looks a lot like that North Star, or yeah, that North Star in the Lorac Pro Noir palette, where it's kind of got that blue iridescence underneath it. But nonetheless, it looks really pretty. And quite possibly some of the cutest and sweetest little palettes I've ever found, that is the real true treasure that I found, are these BH Cosmetics Weekend Vibes palettes. Have different textured shadows. So Bubbly is kind of like a topper shade. It's not quite as glittery, but it is a very translucent base. And then Champagne, and I don't remember if it was Fizzy or if it was Pop, that kind of, well, neither one of those. So we'll just swatch Bubbly. And you can see it next to the Mercury Retrograde. It's not as glittery and not as like translucent. It does have a little bit of a base, but you can see it right there. It's a nice topper shade. Like if you tapped it on some glitter glue shimmer on the lid, you would definitely get a nice, you know, gleaming effect, a nice wet effect. Also, I noticed that the BH Cosmetics Blueberry Muffin palette had a couple of shades in there that seemed to be topper shades. Okay, I'm pretty sure Sweet is one of them. Sugared looks definitely like the North Star and Mercury Retrograde, which I have over here, so we'll swatch it next to that. And Cravings. Those kind of look, well, those might have a bit of a base to them. I don't know. I can see in off camera, I can see that you can see a bit of a transparent base, but there is some base pigment to it. It's not as if they are completely clear. But for being an affordable brand, I feel like this is kind of one of those little gems, you know. These two look very similar. These two right here, which I think was Sugared, and this one, or maybe it was Cravings. It might have been Cravings. This one. Nope, it was Sugared. It was Sugared, so they look very similar. Let me see if I can get them to kind of glisten the same. You know, I would be hard pressed to say that they're really that different in terms of, I mean, I'm sure in terms of formula they're different, but like once swatched out, they look very similar. And I bet on the eyes they would look very similar as well. Okay, that is it for all of my glittery, celestial, shiny, shimmery, wet looking eyeshadows. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. I can't wait to see you guys in my next video.